Good evening, and welcome. Tonight, we travel to the very edge of the known world, a place where the glory of Rome began to fade into mist, where the order of the empire met a silence it could not command. A land the Romans called Caledonia, a land we now know as Scotland. At the height of its power, Rome seemed unstoppable. Its banners waved from the sands of Africa to the frozen rivers of Germania. Its legions crossed mountains, deserts, and seas, leaving behind roads, temples, and marble monuments that still whisper of their glory. To live under the eagle's standard was to live within what Rome called civilization, a world of order, architecture, and iron discipline. But there was one place where that civilization could not reach. A land where the legions, so used to victory, marched forward and never truly came back. The story of Rome's failure in Scotland is not just a tale of battles and borders. It is a story about limits, of empire, of ambition, and of human endurance. It is about a meeting between two worlds, one that believed it could conquer everything, and another that simply refused to be conquered. When the Romans first looked northward from the lands they had taken in Britain, they saw what they believed was another easy conquest. Mountains, yes. Forests, certainly. But nothing that the iron will of Rome had not crushed before. To the Senate and the generals in their marble halls, Caledonia was just another line on the map waiting to be drawn in red. Another name to add to the long list of provinces that glorified the empire. They had tamed Gaul, annexed Egypt, humbled Judea. They believed they could tame the mist itself if it stood in their way. But Caledonia was not a line on the map. It was alive. It breathed through the cold air that rolled down from the highlands, through the rain that never seemed to end, through the forests so ancient that the Romans said even the gods might lose their way there. To the Romans, the land was hostile, alien, and endless. To those who lived there, the tribes who would one day be known as the Picts, it was home. Imagine the legionaries as they marched north, the rhythmic sound of sandals against mud, armor creaking, shields clattering, banners snapping in the wind. They had crossed half the world to be here, from Spain, from Gaul, from North Africa, men who had faced deserts, jungles, and mountains. But here, in this gray land of mist and rain, the sky never cleared, and the ground never seemed to dry. Their camps were soaked, their supplies spoiled, their fires smoked and sputtered in the wind. And still, the order came: advance. Every hill might have hidden an enemy. Every forest whispered of eyes watching from the shadows. Every sound, a branch cracking, a bird taking flight, could be the signal of an ambush. This was not the kind of war Rome knew how to fight. The empire was built on discipline, structure, geometry. Roads laid in straight lines, camps in perfect squares, battles fought on open fields under banners and trumpets. But here the land itself refused to obey that geometry. There were no open fields, no clear lines of sight, only fog and forest. The further they went, the more the order of Rome began to dissolve. In time, the Romans gave this place a name: Terra Incognita, the unknown land. A phrase that appears on old maps like a sigh, as if the cartographer himself had simply given up. For centuries, the Romans had believed that the gods favored them, that every conquest was proof of divine will. But on the edge of Caledonia, the gods were silent. The sky wept. The land swallowed roads and forts alike. And the mist seemed to whisper one simple truth, that some places were never meant to belong to anyone. Here, at the edge of the empire, the world felt larger, even to the Romans who believed they had seen everything. They came with their banners, their Latin prayers, their dreams of control, but in Caledonia, control meant nothing. The mountains did not bow, the rivers did not yield, and the people, painted, fierce, and free, did not submit. As Tacitus would later write, they are more prepared for war than for servitude. That sentence, carved into the silence of history, captures everything Rome could not understand about the North. To rule was their purpose. To resist was Caledonia's destiny. And so began one of the most stubborn, haunting conflicts of the ancient world. A war not only of swords and shields, but of patience, of survival, of a land defending its soul. The painted people, we step into the forests of Caledonia to meet the mysterious tribes who stood against Rome, the Picts, the painted ones, and explore how a people with no cities, no kings, and no written language managed to halt the most powerful army the world had ever known. Would you like me to continue? It wasn't a name they chose for themselves. It was the label the empire gave to a people it could neither understand nor defeat. The word comes to us through Latin historians, men who never truly knew these tribes, but who saw, from the distance of their own arrogance, a people marked with blue symbols, bodies painted and woad, moving through the mist like spirits of the land itself. To the Romans, they were savages, unorganized, uncivilized, and untamable. But that judgment reveals more about Rome than it does about the Picts, because what Rome saw as chaos was in truth another kind of order, one built not on marble or empire, but on survival, silence, and the rhythm of the land. When we imagine the Picts, we must first forget the world of cities and walls. There were no forums here, no temples of polished stone, no senators debating beneath domes. There were brocks, circular stone towers built high upon the hills, watching over valleys and rivers. Homes that looked as if they had grown out of the rocks themselves. Inside them, fires burned low through long winters. Families slept on animal hides, listening to the wind howl through cracks in the walls. Every sound outside, a footstep, a horse, the creak of a tree, was a question. Is it friend, or is it Rome? Their lives were simple but never easy. They hunted deer, fished the lochs, gathered berries, moved their herds across the highlands as the seasons turned. To survive here required more than strength. It demanded patience, knowledge, and a quiet understanding that the land gave nothing freely. To the Romans, this was barbarism. To the Picts, it was balance. Their art was their armor. Before battle, they covered their bodies in blue, lines and spirals that danced across their skin. The pigment came from a plant called woad, crushed and mixed into a dye that bit into the flesh like cold fire. No Roman armor could make a man look as fearsome as one of these warriors stepping out of the fog, his body painted like the night sky, eyes burning with the reflection of torchlight. The designs were not random. Each mark carried meaning, a lineage, a promise, a prayer to the spirits that guarded the hills. They fought not for empire or glory, but for the right to remain as they were, unruled, unchanged, free. And that, to Rome, was the greatest defense of all. When Governor Gaius Julius Agricola marched his legions north in the late 1st century, he carried with him more than weapons. He carried the full confidence of the Roman machine. Agricola's father-in-law, the historian Tacitus, would later write that these tribes were brave but ignorant of civilization, and therefore destined to fall. But Agricola soon learned what every Roman general after him would discover: you cannot conquer what will not stand still. The Picts refused to meet the legions in open battle. They struck at night. They moved like shadows across the hills, appearing only when the mist rolled in thick and white. They knew the land better than the Romans could ever hope to know. Every river crossing, every hidden valley, every path that could trap a column of soldiers was a weapon waiting to be used. To Rome, it was chaos. To the Picts, it was choreography. In the Roman camps, discipline was everything. Tents lined in perfect rows, fires arranged by order, weapons inspected at dawn and dusk. But the Picts had no camps. They slept in the open, wrapped in furs, listening to the sound of the wind. They could vanish by morning, leaving no trail but footprints already washed away by rain. When the Romans advanced, they found nothing. No towns to sack, no crops to seize, no leaders to negotiate with. An enemy without a capital cannot be conquered. An army without a center cannot be broken. This was the secret of Caledonia. Its strength lay in its invisibility. The Picts were not united under a single king. They lived in clans, small, self-sufficient groups led by chieftains whose power came not from gold or titles, but from loyalty and knowledge of the land. One tribe might fight alongside another, then vanish into the mountains and never return. To Rome, that disunity was weakness. In truth, it made them immortal. Because Rome could defeat an army, but it could not defeat a landscape full of ghosts. And still, the legions tried. At the Battle of Mons Graupius, Agricola finally met the Caledonians face to face. Tacitus wrote that nearly 30,000 tribesmen gathered on the slopes, their shields flashing like waves in the morning light. The Romans advanced in perfect formation, iron against wood, order against fury. The result, according to the Roman account, was victory. The Caledonians broke and scattered. Thousands were said to have fallen. But even in victory, Rome lost. Because when the smoke cleared, there were no cities to occupy, no thrones to seize, no tribute to collect. The tribes melted back into the hills, and the land swallowed the battle whole. Agricola left behind forts and roads, but within a few winters, the forests reclaimed them. The rain erased the tracks. The empire's triumph faded into silence. What Rome did not understand was that the Picts' greatest weapon was time. They could wait longer than any army could march. They could starve longer than any garrison could hold. They had no walls because their defense was everywhere. The more the Romans advanced, the more the north withdrew. Into the mountains, into the mists, into legend. And so the question began to haunt the empire. How do you conquer a people who do not want what you have, who see your gold as useless, your laws as chains, your cities as prisons? Tacitus, who wrote from afar, gave us the voice of a Caledonian chieftain, perhaps fictional, but true in spirit. He imagines the leader Calgacus speaking to his warriors before battle. They make a desert and call it peace. A simple sentence, but within it, the entire empire trembled. Because what happens when the world you built, the world of order, discipline, and empire, is called out for what it truly is? Domination. And what if, on the edge of your map, there lives a people who simply say no? The Romans could not understand that refusal. Their world was built on the belief that civilization must spread, that the world would be better once it became Rome. But Caledonia did not agree. And so, year after year, legions came north and returned south, broken, exhausted, and carrying nothing but stories of fog and ghosts. The empire had met something it could not explain, a silence that did not surrender, a people who lived and died without needing Rome's approval. The Romans had fought deserts. They had crossed mountains, burned forests, and marched across half the known world. But nothing prepared them for this. Not the heat of Africa, not the dust of Judea, not even the frozen passes of the Alps. Because Caledonia did not fight like any other enemy. Caledonia itself was the enemy. The moment you crossed into the north, the air changed, the light dimmed, the sky seemed closer, heavier, as though the clouds themselves were watching. Rain did not fall, it lingered. It soaked through wool and leather, filled boots, turned camps into swamps. The ground gave way beneath every footstep, and even the strongest soldier began to wonder if the land wanted them here at all. In the Roman camps, discipline cracked slowly. The fires hissed and died in the wet. Tents sagged with rainwater. Iron rusted overnight. Bread molded. The smell of rot clung to everything, to tunics, to blankets, to skin. They had brought their empire with them. Rules, ranks, rations, the Latin language, the eagle standards. But here, in this silent wilderness, none of it seemed to matter. The land swallowed order, like a wave swallows a footprint. At night, the mist rose from the moors, rolling low and white across the valleys. The soldiers could hear things, cries carried by wind, a horse somewhere unseen, the beat of a drum that might have been just the heart inside their own chest. And sometimes, when the fog thinned just enough, they saw them. Figures painted in blue, silent, watching, at the edge of vision, then gone. No arrows, no charge, just the feeling of being hunted. Rome's answer was the same as always. Build. Walls, roads, forts. They cut straight lines through a land that had never known them. The soldiers felled trees, drained marshes, and laid down stone. They built watchtowers on hills, fortresses by rivers, and mile castles that gleamed with wet granite. But for every road they carved, the forest crept back at night. For every fort they raised, a bridge washed away. For every outpost they garrisoned, a patrol vanished on the march. Caledonia did not fight the legions directly. It waited. The rain waited. The cold waited. The land itself, it simply outlasted them.
By the time of Hadrian, Rome finally accepted what Agricola could not. This was a border that could not be broken, only marked. And so, in the year 122 CE, they built a wall, not to defend Caledonia, but to keep it out. Hadrian's Wall, 80 Roman miles long, a line of stone and discipline drawn between two worlds, the world Rome could control and the world it could not. North of that wall, the land still breathed freely. The painted people still moved through the fog and forest, untamed, unbroken, and unseen.
Time passed. Empires shifted. Names were forgotten. The legions who marched north left behind coins, weapons, bones, but no victory. Their roads faded into grass. Their forts crumbled into moss. Their language vanished into the soil. And still, the land remained. When you walk the highlands today, you can still feel it, that slow heartbeat beneath the wind, that quiet, ancient defiance. The Picts would live on for centuries after Rome's shadow faded. They would merge, evolve, and their blood would flow into the people who would one day be called Scots. But the memory of their defiance, the story of those who painted themselves blue and stood against the greatest empire the world had ever known, would never die. Because some battles are not fought to win. Some are fought simply to remain who you are. So if you ever find yourself in the north, where the heather meets the mist and the stones remember every footstep, listen closely. You might still hear them. The whisper of blue-painted warriors moving through the fog, the land that fought back, and the empire that, well, finally stopped trying to conquer it. The legions are gone now. Their banners, once bright with gold and crimson, lie somewhere beneath the soil, tattered, buried, forgotten. The sound of their marching boots has long since faded into the wind. The empire that sent them has crumbled into dust. But the land remains. And in that land, the echoes of everything that once was still linger, softly. For a time after the Romans withdrew, the frontier fell silent. The great wall they built, Hadrian's Wall, stood alone against the mist, its sentry towers empty, its stones cold to the touch. To the north, the painted people moved freely again. No more garrisons, no more taxes, no more foreign gods carved in marble. The forests returned. The paths overgrew, the roads crumbled back into rivers of stone, and the land began to heal. But Caledonia did not remain untouched forever. From the east came traders, from the west came monks, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, a new age began to dawn. The tribes who once fought Rome changed, mingled, merged. They learned to carve stone, to build in wood, to farm in valleys once marked by Roman forts. They took new names, new gods, new songs. The Picts, fierce and proud, would one day fade into a name, a whisper between history and legend. But they would not vanish. They became part of something new, a land called Alba, and in time, Scotland. Every hill, every glen, every ruin in the north carries a memory. A broken spear buried in peat, a Roman coin glinting in a river, a carving of a horse, a spiral, a warrior painted in blue, etched in stone by a hand that never imagined the world would change so much. If you listen, you can still hear the echo of the clash, not of armies, but of worlds. Rome and the wild, order and freedom, stone and mist.
And yet, the story of Caledonia is not one of victory or defeat. It is a story of balance, of a land that refused to be owned, of a people who asked for nothing but to remain themselves. For all its might, Rome could not understand that kind of strength, the strength to endure without conquest, to exist without empire. And perhaps that is why, 2,000 years later, we still remember them. Not the conquerors, but the ones who stood their ground. The campfires have long gone out. The walls have fallen. The empire is only a name now, half remembered in stone and story.
But in the highlands, beneath the fog, the spirit of Caledonia still breathes. It hums through the wind that rolls across heather and sea. It whispers through the ruins where no flag has ever flown for long. And when night settles, when the world is quiet and you close your eyes, you can almost hear it. That faint, eternal murmur, the sound of a land that could not be conquered. Sleep now, traveler. The legions have marched far enough. The fires have burned low, and the north, the ancient, wild north, keeps its watch beneath the stars. Good night.